Hi, this is Winter. Welcome back to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the story. All right, let's continue. Enjoy.
Determined to uncover the truth, Elfrida began taking careful and deliberate steps. In order to connect with nobles and gather useful information, she actively attended various balls and social gatherings. At the same time, Philon carried out his own investigation. Under Elfrida's instructions, he quietly looked into places and people that might be connected to Misha. Every move they made was done cautiously so as not to arouse suspicion, all with the goal of eventually exposing Misha's wrongdoing to the public. One night, the three of them gathered again to discuss their progress. Elfrida laid out the next step of their plan, explaining that Lionel needed to send a formal invitation to a ball specifically for Misha. She reasoned that if the invitation was sent under Lionel's name, Misha would almost certainly attend. Lionel accepted the plan without hesitation. Elfrida then presented the information they had gathered so far that day. Philon reviewed it and admitted that although they had collected several pieces of information, none of it was truly conclusive yet. Despite this, Elfrida remained optimistic, encouraging them by saying that they still had some time left and that they should continue doing their best. Philon let out a small sigh but agreed to keep going. While listening to the conversation, Lionel quietly observed Elfrida. In his mind, he realized that she must be under tremendous mental pressure. Anyone would struggle to remain cheerful knowing that their life might be threatened again at any moment. As the discussion came to an end, Elfrida thanked Philon for staying up so late to help them and acknowledged that he must be tired. Philon dismissed the concern and excused himself from the room. Lionel then suggested that it was already late and that they should end their work for the night. However, Elfrida immediately resisted the idea. Still holding the documents in her hands, she insisted that she had not even finished organizing the information they had gathered. Seeing how exhausted she was becoming, Lionel stepped forward and gently held her arms to stop her. He warned her that pushing herself too hard would accomplish nothing if she collapsed from overwork. Hearing this, Elfrida looked at him for a moment before finally agreeing. Soon after, the two retired for the night. However, once they were in bed, Elfrida found herself unable to fall asleep. Her mind continued to race with worries about the situation and what might happen if she failed to act. In the quiet darkness, Lionel suddenly called her name. Elfrida realized he was still awake and asked if he had not fallen asleep either. Lionel replied that he had been about to ask her the same question. Elfrida gave no direct answer, only offering a small smile. After a brief pause, Lionel hesitantly made a suggestion. If she truly could not fall asleep, he proposed that they try holding hands while they slept. The suggestion surprised Elfrida, leaving her staring at him in silence. Lionel then explained the reason behind the idea. When his younger brother Mark was a child, he often felt calmer if he could touch someone while falling asleep. Lionel added that since he was there with her now, she could relax and sleep peacefully. Elfrida was still surprised by his kindness. In her mind, she wondered why he was being so gentle with her and worried that such gestures could easily give her the wrong impression. Nevertheless, she quietly thanked him and accepted the offer. When their hands finally clasped together, Elfrida almost immediately drifted into sleep. Lionel watched her for a moment and smiled softly. At Philon's residence, the young butler sat alone, deeply absorbed in thought as he reflected on everything that had happened. The events of the past days replayed in his mind one after another. For most of his life, Philon had harbored nothing but resentment toward nobles. From his experience, the nobles he had encountered were selfish people who cared only about themselves and their own power. To him, they had always seemed like a collection of corrupt individuals who ignored the suffering of others. Yet the two people he now served were different. Lionel and Elfrida had repeatedly shown concern for others and treated people with respect regardless of their background or status. Even someone like him, a boy who had grown up in the slums, had been accepted and valued by them. As Philon reflected on this, a firm belief began to grow within him. Those two had the potential to change the country itself. However, he also understood the seriousness of the situation they were facing. Misha's influence was powerful, and simply gathering information might not be enough to stand against her authority. With that realization, Philon rose to his feet with renewed determination. In his heart, he decided that for the sake of those two, and for the people suffering under the current system, he needed to find something more he could do. Driven by that resolve, Philon stepped toward the door and marched outside, determined to search for another way to help. At the knight's barracks, Lionel was in the middle of his usual training, practicing with his sword with full focus. The sharp sound cutting through the air echoed through the training grounds as he continued his routine. During a short break, Lionel suddenly noticed something unusual nearby. Sensing that someone was hiding close to the training area, he spoke up and called out, suggesting that if the person needed something, they should simply approach him directly. At that moment, Philon stepped out from behind a tree where he had been hiding. Realizing he had been discovered, he walked toward Lionel and apologized, explaining that he had not wanted to interrupt the prince's training. Lionel dismissed the concern and asked what Philon needed. Philon then revealed the reason he had come. Though he admitted that the request might be impolite, he asked Lionel if he could teach him swordsmanship. The request surprised Lionel. He questioned the sudden change in Philon's intentions, wondering why the butler had suddenly decided to pursue such training. Philon responded with determination, explaining that he wanted to become stronger. With that declaration, he bowed deeply and earnestly asked for Lionel's help. Lionel was briefly taken aback by the seriousness of the request. After a moment, however, he agreed. Deciding to humor Philon's determination, Lionel tossed him a wooden practice sword and told him he would give him a chance to train. At the same time, he warned Philon not to complain during the process. Philon accepted enthusiastically, smiling as he thanked Lionel sincerely. The training began immediately. Lionel first instructed Philon on the most basic stance, telling him to relax his shoulders and adjust his posture properly. Philon followed the instructions carefully. Lionel then pointed out that Philon's arm strength was weak and explained that before anything else, he would need to build his muscles. To begin addressing that problem, Lionel ordered him to start doing push-ups. Philon struggled as he counted each repetition, forcing himself through the exercise until he reached 99 and then 100. His body was already trembling with exhaustion when Lionel calmly informed him that 50 more remained. The announcement left Philon stunned. Overwhelmed by fatigue, he collapsed onto the ground, thinking to himself that he could not continue any longer. Lionel then challenged him, asking if he was already giving up. Hearing that, Philon remembered the determination he had made earlier. Reminding himself of his decision to grow stronger, he pushed past the exhaustion, stood back up, and prepared to continue. At the training grounds of the knight's barracks, Lionel and Philon eventually moved from simple drills to a direct sparring match. Each of them held a wooden sword as they faced one another, ready to begin. Philon made the first move, charging forward with determination and swinging his weapon. Lionel immediately blocked the attack with ease. As he defended, he calmly pointed out that the strike had been too slow and that Philon was using far too much effort in each movement. Refusing to give up, Philon quickly prepared another attack. Determined to improve, he tried again with renewed energy. However, Lionel reacted instantly. In a single swift motion, he stepped in and placed the tip of his wooden sword against Philon's neck, stopping the attack before it could even begin. The result was obvious. Philon lowered his sword and collapsed onto one knee, exhausted and frustrated, acknowledging that the match was already over. Seeing this, Lionel spoke honestly, explaining that swordsmanship simply did not suit Philon. Philon accepted the statement without argument and admitted that he understood. Lionel then asked the question that had been on his mind. If Philon already knew that the sword was not his strength, why was he pushing himself this far? Lionel even pointed out that Philon had always hated nobles, and Lionel himself was one of them. Philon answered without hesitation. He admitted that he still hated nobles in general, but Lionel and Elfrida were different. They had paid attention to people like him, the poor and forgotten. Philon confessed that he had never met a noble who treated him with such kindness, and because of that, he wanted to repay them. Lionel remained silent for a moment as he listened. Then he gave Philon advice. Instead of forcing himself down a path that did not suit him, Lionel encouraged him to protect them in the way he was best at. He explained that strength was not the only way to protect people. In many situations, information could be far more powerful than brute force. Philon already possessed that ability, and Lionel reminded him that he had helped them more than enough through his skills. Hearing those words deeply inspired Philon. Filled with renewed determination, he declared that he would do his best to gather even more information for them. Lionel smiled at the response and asked if Philon would continue supporting them from now on. As he said this, he extended his hand forward. Philon eagerly reached out and shook Lionel's hand, happily confirming that he would. Inside Elfrida's study room, she spent her time carefully organizing the documents and investigation records they had gathered so far. Papers were spread across the desk as she worked through each report, reviewing the information one by one and compiling everything in order. While continuing her work, she opened one of the drawers in her desk. Inside, she noticed an unfamiliar envelope that immediately caught her attention. For a moment, she wondered to herself what it could be. Curious, Elfrida took the envelope and opened it. As she began reading the contents of the letter inside, her expression gradually changed. The moment she finished reading, a confident smile appeared on her face. The contents of the letter revealed something extremely important, something that could serve as undeniable proof of Misha's wrongdoing. With that realization, Elfrida recognized that she was now holding indisputable evidence of Misha's evil deeds. Following the plan they had carefully prepared, Lionel sent an official invitation to Misha. The invitation was delivered under his name, ensuring that she would attend. The party had been arranged with a very specific purpose, to draw Misha out and eventually bring her to justice for her misdeeds. When the night of the event arrived, the venue was filled with nobles and distinguished guests. Many of them were surprised by the occasion, quietly discussing the unusual situation among themselves. Some wondered why Prince Lionel was hosting a party, while others mentioned that the event had likely been arranged at Lady Elfrida's request. Meanwhile, Elfrida was finishing her preparations for the evening. Lionel waited patiently nearby with Philon. After some time, Elfrida finally appeared and apologized for keeping Lionel waiting. Lionel calmly assured her that it was not a problem. As Philon looked at Elfrida in her elegant appearance, he could not help but think to himself in amazement that her beauty was truly striking. Lionel then asked if she was ready, and Elfrida confidently replied that she was. With determination, she declared that it was time to face the mastermind behind everything. Together, they entered the party hall. The moment the guests saw them, whispers spread through the crowd. Many admired Lionel's usual handsome appearance, while others were captivated by the elegance of Elfrida's dress. Lionel then stepped forward and addressed the guests. He thanked everyone for accepting the invitation and expressed his gratitude for their presence. He also announced that a splendid meal had been prepared for them and encouraged everyone to enjoy the evening together as fellow citizens of the nation. Just as the atmosphere began to settle, a new voice suddenly echoed through the hall, greeting the gathering. Lionel and Elfrida both turned their attention toward the entrance. In that moment, Elfrida realized that the person they had been waiting for had finally arrived. Misha calmly apologized for her late arrival, explaining that her preparations had taken some time. The guests quickly recognized her and began murmuring again, noting that Lady Misha's presence would surely make the gathering even more elegant. Misha then approached Lionel and greeted him politely, expressing her pleasure at seeing him again. Lionel returned the greeting with equal courtesy before excusing himself and encouraging her to enjoy the party. The guests applauded Lionel as the evening continued. Amid the elegant atmosphere of the hall, Misha wore a subtle yet sinister smile. At the same time, Elfrida also smiled quietly, knowing that the true purpose of the party had only just begun. The party continued smoothly, just as Lionel and Elfrida had planned. Guests mingled, conversations flowed, and the atmosphere remained lively as the two hosts greeted nobles and exchanged polite words with those in attendance. While speaking with several guests, Elfrida quietly scanned the room, keeping a careful watch on the crowd. After a moment, she realized something strange. Misha was nowhere to be seen. The sudden absence made Elfrida wonder where she had gone. Then, without warning, a voice greeted her from behind. When Elfrida turned, she found Misha standing there. Misha politely addressed her, offering a courteous greeting. Lionel immediately sensed something suspicious in the sudden appearance and instinctively became cautious, but Elfrida calmly stopped him from intervening. Maintaining a composed smile, Elfrida returned the greeting and expressed her pleasure at seeing that Misha was doing well. Misha then apologized for what had happened previously, claiming that she had never known about the relationship between Elfrida and Prince Lionel. She remarked that she could never have imagined such a situation, not even in her dreams. Elfrida responded calmly, reassuring her that there was no need to worry and that anyone else would likely have thought the same thing. However, Misha's tone soon shifted. She expressed concern about something she had heard, something troubling regarding Elfrida's household. Elfrida immediately sensed something strange in the way Misha described it, referring to someone in her home in a suspicious manner. Misha then revealed the rumor she claimed to have heard. According to her, Elfrida had secretly brought a boy from the slums into her household without even informing Prince Lionel. The accusation stunned both Lionel and Elfrida. Almost immediately, murmurs spread throughout the crowd of nobles. Shock and gossip rippled across the hall as guests whispered to one another, questioning the situation. Some expressed disbelief that a woman who already had a partner would bring another man into her household, while others were even more scandalized by the claim that the boy came from the slums. As the whispers intensified, Elfrida quickly understood what was happening. In her mind, she recognized Misha's thinking clearly. As someone obsessed with bloodline superiority, Misha believed that Lionel, as a royal, must naturally share the same prejudice. Taking advantage of her influence, Misha was manipulating the situation, knowing that the other nobles would not dare oppose her openly. It was a calculated attempt to publicly humiliate Elfrida. Lionel could also sense that the situation was quickly shifting in Misha's favor. Realizing the danger, he tried to intervene and explain the truth. However, before he could finish speaking, Misha suddenly raised her voice again and delivered another accusation. She claimed that the boy from the slums was not just an ordinary servant, but someone who had once been a habitual thief. The statement shocked the entire hall even more. The guests erupted into louder murmurs, many immediately believing the claim simply because it came from someone as influential as Lady Misha. Some began criticizing the Claude household, saying it was disgraceful for such a person to be allowed into such a respected noble family. Others even directed their hostility toward Elfrida herself, accusing the red-haired lady of bringing trouble exactly as they had expected. The wave of accusations stunned Elfrida for a moment as she listened to the crowd turning against her. Inside her mind, however, she knew the truth. Philon was nothing like the person Misha was describing. The entire story was a fabrication. Misha had launched the attack so suddenly and skillfully that Elfrida had been caught off guard. Still, Elfrida quickly regained her composure. Though Misha believed she had gained the upper hand, Elfrida remained calm, because Misha did not yet realize that Elfrida had already prepared a plan of her own. As the commotion in the hall grew louder, Elfrida stepped forward and addressed the crowd, asking everyone to remain calm. While maintaining her composed expression, she realized that the moment had finally arrived, the moment to reveal the evidence of Misha Tark's wrongdoing. With confidence, she declared that she would explain everything to them. Amid the growing tension, Lionel stood nearby and remembered the conversation he had shared with Elfrida before they entered the grand hall earlier that evening. At that time, Elfrida had asked him for a promise. No matter what Misha said or did during the party, Lionel was not to interfere. When Lionel had questioned the reason, Elfrida explained that Misha's target was her alone, and she wanted to confront the situation with her own hands. Lionel had smiled at her determination and agreed that he would not intervene recklessly. Now, standing in the hall as the situation escalated, Lionel recalled those words. Though he had made that promise, he could not help but think that if Elfrida were truly placed in danger, he might not be able to remain silent. Meanwhile, Misha responded to Elfrida's declaration, asking if that meant Elfrida was willing to admit the accusations being spread. Elfrida immediately denied it, stating firmly that there was no truth to the claims. An unpleasant look crossed Misha's face as Elfrida continued speaking. She began by addressing the matter of the boy Misha had mentioned. Elfrida acknowledged that the boy was indeed living in their household, but she clarified that this decision had been made with the full approval of her husband, Lionel. The statement visibly shocked Misha. Elfrida continued explaining that the boy in question was hard-working and that even Lionel himself recognized the effort and dedication he had shown. Because of that, she argued that it would be unthinkable to ignore such talent simply because he was not born into nobility. She then reminded the audience that a butler serving a noble household must possess dignity and discipline. For that reason, the boy had undergone thorough training. Through that training, he had grown into someone worthy of serving within a royal household. With graceful composure, Elfrida asked the crowd not to speak poorly of their butler and concluded her explanation with a respectful bow. The hall fell into silence. Inside her mind, Misha was furious. The idea that Lionel himself had approved such a decision felt completely unacceptable to her. In her view, it was unimaginable that royalty would allow a commoner from such a background to serve in their household. Before the silence could settle, someone in the crowd raised another concern, questioning the accusation about theft. Another guest quickly added that theft was a serious crime regardless of social status. Elfrida began to respond to the accusation, but before she could finish speaking, another voice suddenly interrupted. Philon stepped forward and asked everyone to wait. Elfrida looked at him in surprise, calling his name. Philon apologized to her and asked for permission to explain the matter himself. Elfrida hesitated, unsure whether she should allow it. At that moment, Lionel gently placed a hand on her shoulder, silently stopping her from intervening. Understanding the gesture, Elfrida finally agreed to let Philon speak. As the tension in the hall continued to rise, one of the guests finally spoke up and asked if the young man standing before them was the butler being discussed. Philon confirmed that he was. He bowed deeply to the assembled nobles and apologized for causing them concern. After straightening himself, he began to explain his situation. He openly admitted that he had indeed come from the slums and that his family still lived there. In order to support them, he had done everything he could, and during those difficult years, he had endured countless moments of humiliation. Before he could continue further, Misha attempted to interrupt, as if ready to use his words against him. However, Philon immediately continued speaking, firmly declaring that despite his difficult past, he had never committed any crimes. He emphasized that he had never wanted to become like the corrupt nobles he had seen, those who filled their pockets through dishonest means. His bold words caused both Misha and the surrounding guests to fall silent for a moment. Philon went on to explain that within the country, there were indeed many nobles like those he described, but there were also countless people suffering in poverty, just like his own family. He then spoke with conviction about Lionel and Elfrida, declaring that they were the kind of people who could change the world. Swearing loyalty to the masters he respected, Philon boldly stated that the accusations being made by Lady Misha were nothing more than lies. Misha reacted angrily to the accusation. She scolded him for his rudeness and insisted that there was a limit to such baseless claims. According to her, there was no evidence anywhere proving that she had lied. At that moment, Elfrida stepped forward. With calm confidence, she declared that this was not true. The evidence proving Misha's wrongdoing was already in her possession. The statement immediately shocked Misha. As the tension in the hall reached its peak, The atmosphere suddenly shifted when someone from the crowd finally stepped forward. A noble lady spoke up and revealed that she had once witnessed Lady Misha assaulting a maid. She explained that when she had seen it happen, Misha had threatened to destroy her father's business if she dared to speak about it, forcing her to remain silent. Another person in the crowd followed, revealing a similar experience. This individual explained that Misha had once threatened to revoke their son's college admission unless they signed a contract she demanded. Soon, more voices joined in. One person after another admitted that they had also been threatened. Some even declared that they possessed evidence proving what had happened to them. For a moment, Misha stood speechless as the accusations rapidly multiplied around her. However, she quickly tried to regain control of the situation by dismissing all the claims as fabricated lies. Elfrida then stepped forward to address the crowd. She explained that the people speaking out were victims who had long been threatened by Lady Misha. Because the Tark family was one of the most powerful noble houses in the country, many people had been too afraid of retaliation to oppose her openly. For years, they had endured the situation in silence, fearing the consequences of speaking up. Elfrida then asked the gathered nobles whether the words of someone who had harmed so many people could truly be trusted. Encouraged by her words, another guest spoke out, urging others to examine the documents that had been brought forward as proof. Several pieces of evidence were shown, and some of the nobles inspecting them quickly noticed signs that the records had been manipulated. Realizing this, they began questioning Misha's accusations more openly, with some concluding that the earlier claim about Philon being a thief must also have been a lie. Meanwhile, Misha's expression stiffened as the situation spiraled out of her control. In her mind, she struggled to understand how everything had turned against her so suddenly. Just moments earlier, everything had been proceeding exactly as she intended. Now, the red-haired woman she despised had managed to corner her. Desperately, Misha searched for something, anything, that she could use to regain the upper hand. At that moment, Elfrida calmly announced that there was still one more thing she wished to show everyone. Lionel stepped forward and handed her the envelope he had been keeping hidden. The moment Misha saw the envelope, fear and panic flashed across her face. The reaction made it clear that she recognized it immediately. Holding the envelope in her hand, Elfrida remarked that it seemed Misha had seen it before. She then stated that it was time for Misha to confess and admit to the serious crime she had committed. Shaken, Misha demanded to know how Elfrida had obtained such knowledge. Elfrida then revealed a shocking truth to everyone present. She explained that not long ago, she had been poisoned and left hovering between life and death. The revelation sent waves of shock through the crowd. Continuing her explanation, Elfrida stated that the document inside the envelope contained the details related to that very incident. As she prepared to reveal it, Misha suddenly tried to stop her, shouting for her to wait. But Elfrida opened the letter and presented it to the assembled guests. The document, written by Misha herself, clearly contained instructions for carrying out the poisoning. The grand hall fell into stunned silence as the truth was finally revealed. Misha stood frozen, overwhelmed by shock and pressure as the evidence was placed before everyone. A strained sound escaped her as she struggled to process what had just happened. Elfrida remained composed and continued explaining the situation to the crowd. She revealed that the letter clearly stated it was supposed to be burned after being read. However, before that could happen, they had already secured the accomplice who received it, allowing them to recover the document safely. She calmly stated that this would be the final piece of evidence she would present. The gathered nobles read the letter. As its contents were revealed, waves of shock spread throughout the hall. Elfrida then addressed the guests, asking them directly whether anyone could still take Lady Misha's side after seeing such undeniable proof. One noble carefully compared the handwriting and soon declared that it perfectly matched the documents Misha had written before. Others began reacting loudly, their disbelief growing stronger with every passing moment. Some questioned how the powerful Tark family could be involved in attempted murder. Others admitted that they had always felt something dangerous about Misha, but had never dared to say it aloud. Voices rose throughout the hall as people demanded to know how she intended to take responsibility for such a crime. Misha stood in the center of the room, completely mortified as the crowd turned against her. At that moment, Lionel stepped forward and silenced the commotion. He firmly declared that the matter would be handled properly and that Lady Misha would explain everything in full at the Knights' headquarters. Instead of calming down, Misha erupted in desperation. Her emotions spilled out uncontrollably as she questioned why everything had ended this way. In a bitter outburst, she confessed the reason behind her actions. She revealed that she had pushed herself relentlessly in order to gain Lionel's attention. She had worked tirelessly to make herself beautiful, worn dresses she never even liked, and denied herself the things she wanted just so she could become a woman worthy of standing beside him. Yet despite all that effort, Lionel had suddenly married someone else. A red-haired woman she believed to be nothing more than a symbol of misfortune. Unable to accept it, she demanded to know how such a thing could happen. Hearing this, Elfrida fell silent. Inside her mind, conflicting thoughts began to swirl. She realized that Misha truly believed beauty was everything, and that this belief had driven her further and further down a dark path. Because it had not been enough to eliminate Elfrida, Misha had continued escalating her actions until they became unforgivable. Elfrida knew that what Misha had done was undeniably evil, yet the confessions stirred memories she had long buried, memories from her previous life. She remembered the time when she had been known as Miss Sheena, someone who helped others become beautiful and pursue the people they loved. She could still recall encouraging someone who had finally gained the courage to confess their feelings after working hard to improve themselves. Back then, she had sincerely supported those efforts and celebrated their determination. Now, standing in the present, Elfrida felt the weight of those memories. A troubling question formed in her mind. If she had once supported people who struggled to become beautiful for love, did she truly have the right to condemn Misha completely? Faced with that dilemma, Elfrida found herself uncertain for the first time. She didn't know what she should do next. The grand hall remained heavy with tension as the aftermath of the revelation settled over the gathered nobles. Misha stood frozen in place, her composure completely shattered, while the crowd waited to see what would happen next. Lionel finally stepped forward and addressed her directly. With calm authority, he explained that he had never judged people based on their appearance. What mattered to him was a person's inner character. He openly declared his love for Elfrida, describing the qualities that had drawn him to her, her intelligence, her strong will, and the bold ideas she sometimes brought forward without hesitation. Those were the very things that had captured his heart. He continued by reminding Misha that Elfrida was not only his beloved wife, but also a member of the royal family. Because of that, the crime she had committed could not simply be overlooked. Even a powerful house like the Tark family would not be able to escape responsibility for harming someone of such standing. Lionel ended his words by making it clear that she needed to understand the seriousness of what she had done. Misha remained stunned as his words sank in. Tears slowly fell from her eyes, and she quietly acknowledged what he had said. At that moment, the doors of the grand hall suddenly burst open. A group of knights rushed inside, announcing their arrival and reporting to Lionel that they had come as ordered. Lionel immediately gave them instructions. He ordered the knights to take Misha into custody and to contact both the king and the head of the Tark family at once so the matter could be formally addressed. The knights saluted in response and quickly moved to escort Misha out of the ballroom. Surrounded by the guards, she was led away from the hall while the nobles watched in silence. With the immediate chaos finally ending, the atmosphere in the room slowly began to settle. Elfrida, however, remained quiet, still standing where she was as the weight of everything that had happened lingered in her mind. Noticing her silence, Lionel gently called out to her. He reassured her that everything was finally over and suggested that they return to their room to rest for the time being. Hearing his voice brought Elfrida back from her thoughts. She looked relieved and responded warmly, expressing her gratitude before agreeing to leave with him. The grand party eventually came to an end, though not in the elegant manner it had begun. Instead, it closed amid a storm of whispers, shock, and lingering tension among the nobles who had witnessed the dramatic downfall of Lady Misha. Following the incident, Misha was taken into custody and confined in a detention facility reserved for nobles. At the same time, the Tark estate was officially placed under investigation, and the authorities began examining the crimes connected to the powerful family. Meanwhile, life continued within Lionel and Elfrida's household. Phelon was allowed to remain in his position, and after the truth had been revealed, he was officially permitted to continue his work as their butler. The young man carried out his duties with renewed determination, serving the household cheerfully as the days passed. Later that evening, the atmosphere inside Lionel and Elfrida's private room was quiet. Elfrida sat silently, her mind drifting through the events that had unfolded. In her thoughts, she reflected on the outcome. For now, she had successfully avoided the tragic route that the original story had once followed. The danger that had loomed over her life had been prevented, at least for the time being. Yet another question began to surface in her mind. Now that her main objective had been accomplished, she wondered what would happen next. If she were honest with herself, she knew that there was no longer any real reason for her to continue the contractual marriage with Lionel. Their relationship had originally been based on mutual benefit, nothing more. Still, the idea of leaving immediately troubled her. If she were to disappear now, the very reason Lionel had entered the contract marriage in the first place would lose its meaning. That was not something she wanted to do to him. After thinking it through, she quietly reached a decision in her heart. When the heroine of the original story eventually appeared, that would be the moment for her to disappear quietly from Lionel's life. In her mind, that seemed like the best path for his future. While she was lost in these thoughts, Lionel suddenly spoke, asking if she was all right. His voice pulled her back to the present moment. Realizing she had been silent for some time, she explained that she had simply been lost in thought. Lionel then revealed something he had come to realize during the recent events. He admitted that their relationship had originally been nothing more than a mutually beneficial arrangement. However, when Elfrida had collapsed after being poisoned, his mind had gone completely blank. In that terrifying moment, he had realized just how deeply he feared losing her. Somewhere along the way, without him even noticing, she had become an irreplaceable part of his life. Hearing those words left Elfrida stunned. Lionel clenched his fists as he tried to continue speaking, clearly struggling with the emotions he wanted to express. But when he looked up and saw Elfrida's face, he suddenly froze and called her name again in surprise. Tears had begun streaming down her cheeks. Even Elfrida herself seemed confused by it. She questioned why she was crying and quickly tried to wipe the tears from her face. Before she could compose herself, Lionel suddenly stepped forward and pulled her into an embrace. The unexpected gesture left Elfrida completely shocked. Holding her gently, Lionel reassured her that if there was anything troubling her, he would make sure to remove it. If she felt dissatisfied with him for failing to protect her until now, he told her she had every right to end their contract. But above all, he pleaded with her not to cry. For a brief moment, Elfrida instinctively moved as if she were about to return the embrace. But just before her arms could close around him, she stopped herself. Instead, she quietly told him that she was all right and thanked him for his concern.
Hi, this is Winter. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Winter Manhwa for more exciting recaps every week. Your support means the world. See you in the next one.